I don't know. I think I can go home after Elise's children's sermon from earlier. So those of you may have already passed through the fellowship hall, but they had all the tables set up for a wedding later this afternoon. And if you walk through the hallway, they had the fun balloon towers, right? That was pretty great to celebrate our graduating seniors in a brunch. And I don't know about all of you, but today kind of reminds me of something exciting that most families have. Today feels a lot like a big family gathering. You know the ones that I'm talking about. They happen at holidays or reunions or other special occasions. I know for me growing up, they happened during Thanksgiving when we'd visit one side of the family and then we'd trek everybody along in the car to the next side of the family. I love these gatherings. They consisted of the embarrassing stories from my parents' childhoods, laughing with cousins we only see during these gatherings because perhaps they've moved away. But it also came with another side of things, too. It came with parents having those hushed conversations amongst one another about how life really is going that they'd never tell their kids. And then comes the best part of any family get-together, the food. Great, fantastic. I'm personally a ham person myself at Thanksgiving. I know that's kind of controversial. Some people are more turkey people. We can save that for another day. And I don't know what your experiences might have been like, but for my family, the meal at these types of get-togethers always have one thing, and it's two separate experiences. You can probably even finish my sentence if you wanted to. You have the adult table, and then you have the kids' table, yes. And these two tables may be a part of the same meal, but the experiences at each table are very, very different. At the adult table, you have the nice tablecloth and the fine china that was given from great-grandmother, passed down through generations, and the nice silverware, the nice glasses, centerpieces. Typically, the adults are taking bigger portions of food, and the conversation at the adult table is much more mature, whatever that means. And at the kids' table, you find a different experience. The table isn't quite set so nice. There's plastic plates, plastic utensils, plastic cups. You see I'm emphasizing plastic a lot. We're not giving the fine china at the kids' table very often. You'll even have sippy cups for the infants because it would be a miracle to make it through the meal without a spill. And what about the conversation at the kids' table? I mean, they're definitely not talking about the things that adults are talking about. They're not talking about the weather or the next presidential election or any of these other things, right? But there's fun and laughter and energy and craziness, silliness, maybe even some crying and fighting. Well, probably crying and fighting. One meal, two tables, two very different experiences. And for the most part, this setup works. It's practical. It's convenient. But at the same time, it creates a gap in the family a little bit. I had some parents come up to me after the first service and talk about how I'm not convincing them to change their layout at their family gatherings. So stay with me. This is not to shame you into one way or the other. But these two tables are separated from one another, and the kids and the adult table, both tables are missing out on some of the key experiences that help a family grow and thrive. The adult table without the kids misses out on some of the fun and laughter and a lot of the energy. I mean, there could be a lot of fun and laughter at the adult table, but it doesn't have the same feel as at the kids' table a little bit. And they also miss out on the spills and the messes and the learning opportunities because we've gotten past that stage in our lives. And what does the kids' table miss out? They miss out on the stories and the reminiscing on the family's past. They miss the story of how grandma and grandpa first fell in love, how their mom and dad used to mess up and get into trouble just like they do, although that might be the best kept family secret that the adults don't want the kids to hear. Essentially, what everyone misses out on is a shared sense of identity, sense of belonging in the family, and this idea that everyone has something to contribute. Too often the church, the family of God, has the same problem and suffers as a result. It's easy to look at the church and see this same setup, 2 tables, a kids table and an adult table. I remember visiting churches when I was younger where the Sunday morning worship was called Big Church or the adult worship service, and they would even take us as kids away to some other far away room and teach us Bible while the adults are in here. It was made very clear to us that we may be invited to the same meal, we may be invited to church, but this table, the adults' table, big worship, big church, was not the place that we were supposed to eat at. It wasn't our place. Our place was at the kids' table. But at some point, we grow up and we become teenagers. And we have to ask ourselves the question that every family wrestles with. At what point do I go from the kids' table to the adults' table? When do I graduate, essentially? Where's my place? At which table do I belong? In my class at seminary this semester, we were asked this question: at what point are people considered adults in society? So I kind of ask us the same question. At what point do our young people in the church graduate from the kids' table to the adult table? Is it when they get confirmed? Possibly. Is it when they have a driver's license? That's also kind of a good one. Is it when they can finally be 18 and vote in the presidential elections and all of those political things? Or, and this is the one I have to say in hushed voice because we don't like to ask this one, do we allow our young people to graduate to the big kid table when they can finally start giving financially to the church? And this is where I believe the 2-table setup in the church is hurting us, because somewhere along the way, young people get lost in this transition between the kids' table in church and the adult table. I mean, in a normal family setting, the nieces and nephews are always going to be a part of the family, no matter where they go. The seniors that we just celebrated today, no matter how far away they go into college, they always know they can come back home and be a part of the family. But in the church, it's slightly different. Today we're celebrating our graduates, and it's an exciting time for our students, but it's at times like these they begin asking questions, what's next? And while they might have some of the answers, there's still things of what next. And the truth is that high school graduation is not only one of the most difficult transitions in a teenager's life, but it is also the most difficult transitions in a teenager's faith. Research is revealing that teenagers are leaving the church and the faith at an alarming rate after graduation. Studies show that of the students who grow up in the church and attend youth group, at least 50% fall away from the church and faith after high school. Some say 60, and some even go as far as 70%. Now, that's not to scare the parents in the room, but that's just the reality of where we're at. And I think a lot of this has to do with these 2 tables in the church specifically. Because what happens is kids eventually grow out of the youth ministry, and then even that sometimes is kind of a step up to a different table. And sometimes that transition gets a little lost. And then we go from the youth ministry, and then they move up to the adult table, or we want them to, and they want more. They want to go deeper in their faith. They want to experience a shared identity with the church. But when they go to check out the adult table, they quickly realize that a place was not saved for them there. It's not their time yet, they're told. They are the future, they're told, so they should wait for the future. And so what do you do if you don't have a place at either table? I don't know about you, but if I go to a family gathering or a barbecue and there's no spot for me at the table, I will quickly pick up and go home altogether. This, I think, is why teenagers are leaving the church and faith at alarming rates. And you know who suffers as a result? The teens and the families do, of course, but I think that the church itself suffers as a result. Because all of a sudden the church is missing something it needs. It's missing the gifts and the talents of young people. It's missing the passion and the willingness of our young adults and college students. And at some point we need to ask ourselves if 2 separate tables are working anymore. And that's where we come to our scripture passage for today. Paul here is speaking to the church in Corinth. This is after Jesus has already left this earth and ascended to his Father in heaven. The Apostle Paul is building on this fundamental truth using the metaphor of the body. Paul is emphasizing to us the mutuality of the body and comparing the church to that. No one part is greater than the other, and each part has a specific and distinct role. An eye is not a hand. An eye is also not a head. A head is not a foot, and a foot is not a head. Each of those parts has a distinct role, a distinct calling. The cool thing about the human body is that the average person who, when they're a baby, all of these organs are functioning immediately for the most part. From birth, the heart is pumping blood, the lungs are breathing, the tongue allows the baby to make sounds and eat. Possibly wish they made a little less sound sometimes, I'm sure, but it's working from the beginning. There's no waiting for the heart to start pumping or lungs to start breathing. They just do. Their calling begins now. They have purpose now. They have vocation now. The only thing that changes with age is that the muscles get stronger, more efficient, and the person is able to have more experience using these things. So we may have children and youth, adults and seniors all in our church, but everyone has calling, vocation, and purpose now, at whatever stage of life we're in. And that's why for the church to thrive, everyone needs a place at the table. When the two tables, the kids' table and the adult table, are split up at family gatherings, each table is missing something unique until that crazy uncle who wants to be a part of both experience stands up and says, "This simply is not working." He does the impossible, the unthinkable. He pulls the adult table and the kids' table together. And not only that, sometimes he might even rearrange the seats a little bit so that way the kids are sitting next to the adults and the adults are sitting next to the kids, and it's this beautiful mingling together. And that's because the crazy uncle gets it. He understands that for the family to thrive as one, everyone needs a place at the same table. That is what practicing resurrection looks like. Jesus was always pulling tables together, rearranging the seats, so to speak, to allow fishermen and tax collectors, the least and the lost, to come together for God's glory, all in the same room. And in the same way, for the church to thrive, everyone needs a place at the table. And the beautiful thing is that the same thing can happen in the church. Now, what does that actually look like to pull the kids and the adult tables together in the church? It looks like kids bringing their laughter and their fun into times of worship. And so a little sidebar here for parents who have infants, a crying infant in the church is not something to be ashamed of, but rather something to be celebrated. The sound of the Lego pieces that are going on as we speak is something to be celebrated and acknowledged and be thankful for. And it looks like teenagers and young adults serving alongside people on worship teams and in the community and on committees, and them having a legitimate voice in the life of the church. I mean, where else are kids and teenagers going to learn about their church history and their heritage? Where else are they going to experience the shared identity with the church, with the family? Will there be spills and messes? You can bet. But how else do we grow? And after the meal, where does everyone go? The kids go back to the yard to play with one another, and the teens go back to throwing a baseball around. And even better, sometimes the crazy uncle follows them outside and continues to throw the baseball with them or the football. And he plays with them, and along the way, they help each other grow. And we need those crazy aunts and uncles in the church to invest in the lives of young people. We need brave people who are willing to volunteer in children's and youth ministry. And it's important to meet them where they are. But just as important are the times when we all eat at one table. Young people need adults to help them discern where they stand and what they stand for as they use their leadership now. A slight testimony about this. I personally have grown more teaching Sunday school and leading our youth group than at any other point in my life. And I know normally people think like, oh, I'm supposed to be the ones helping them grow, and sure, that's happening, but I also am growing alongside with them. These teenagers up here minister to me whether we recognize it or not. I can remember last month we were teaching about anger, and I mentioned how we should respond in the midst of anger and when people have hurt us. And one youth boldly looked me in the face, dead eyes, and said, "But what if they've seriously hurt me? I feel like I can't just forgive them and move on." Now, that stopped me in my tracks for a second, because that is not the typical Sunday school answer. That is not simply Jesus loves me. This I know. That is the real, the honest, the vulnerable response that adults, we never want to admit that we have those questions to begin with. It ministered to me in that moment because I actually had to think. Move from the answer that was on the page of the curriculum and wrestle with how I should respond in this moment as a person of faith. And to see the growth from 2.5 years ago, when I was just the random youth pastor, to now, it has been great. I was told just this last week that some of the youth who were here when I was first interviewing for this job, they said, "Man, he looks like he's shaking in his boots. Like, is he going to be okay? He looks scared to be here." And to see where we are now, that there's a youth that feels comfortable enough to have that type of honest conversation, that growth has ministered to me just as much as I'm ministering to them. Imagine what would happen if we pulled the tables together. Imagine what would happen if kids and teenagers grew up and they knew they had a place in the church because they had been playing a significant role all along. Imagine what would happen if kids and teenagers stopped hearing that they are the future of the church and started hearing that they are the church now and were given the opportunities to do so. And it doesn't take much. All I had when I first interviewed for the job was a love for kids and a willingness to be with them. I did not have a fancy seminary degree or training, but we grow with them. So imagine what would happen if we had more crazy aunts and uncles who intentionally invested in the lives of young people, who pulled the kids' table and the adults' table together and invited them to serve with them, learn with them, teach with them, allow them to teach us, and allow them to help us grow with them. My guess is that when this happens, we would not be a church that just exists. If this happened, we would not be a church that just functions. If this happened, we would not be a church that just does good things, but we would be a church that thrives. Because for the church to thrive, everyone needs a place at the table. And when everyone has a place at the table, when everyone has a significant role to play in the life of the church, we can have a greater kingdom impact on those around us than we ever could have imagined. But for that to happen, for the church to thrive, everyone needs a place at the table. May it be so. Amen.